Felix, wake up! Hyunjin's voice tore through the music before the final beat could finish. Felix collapsed. 1 second he was standing beneath the harsh white studio lights, headphones resting around his neck, one hand gripping the edge of the mixing desk while he argued with the producer about a vocal take. The next, his knees simply gave out. His shoulders struck the floor first, then his head nearly followed. Hyunjin moved before anyone else even understood what had happened. The chair behind him scraped violently across the floor as he shoved it away. His headphones fell somewhere behind him, the cables snapping against the polished surface, but he never looked back. Felix. He crossed the studio faster than anyone had ever seen him move. By the time the others reached Felix, Hyunjin was already on his knees beside him. Felix, hey, look at me. The music was still playing. A deep bass line pulsed through the speakers, absurdly cheerful against the sudden terror in the room. Hyunjin reached for Felix's face with trembling fingers. Turn it off. Someone finally killed the speakers. Silence crashed down. Hyunjin could hear his own breathing. He could hear the air conditioner. He could hear the faint electrical hum of the recording equipment. And underneath all of it, he could hear the question pounding inside his skull. Why isn't he waking up, Felix? His fingers touched Felix's cheek. Cold, too cold. Hyunjin's stomach dropped. Call someone. I already am. Them again. Hyunjin. Now, his voice cracked across the studio. Everyone froze. Hyunjin rarely shouted. That was what made it frightening. He looked down again. Felix's eyelashes remained still against his cheeks. A strand of blonde hair had fallen across his forehead and Hyunjin brushed it away with shaking fingers. Come on, he whispered. You're not doing this, was no response. Hyunjin swallowed. Not here. His hand moved to Felix's wrist. He found a pulse weak, but there a breath escaped Hyunjin's chest. Then Felix suddenly inhaled sharply. His body jerked. Felix's eyes opened for half a second. They were unfocused, confused. He stared at Hyunjin as though he were trying to recognize him through thick fog. Hyun, the sound was barely audible. Hyunjin leaned closer. I'm here. Felix's lips moved. What happened? You passed out. Felix blinked. Then strangely, he smiled. Okay. Hyunjin stared at him. The smile disappeared from his face. Felix frowned. What? Don't say you're okay. The words came out quieter than Hyunjin intended. Felix looked away. That tiny movement was enough, Hyunjin noticed. And suddenly the fear inside him changed shape. This wasn't the first time. Felix knew something he hadn't told them, something he hadn't told Hyunjin. And that realization frightened Hyunjin more than the collapse itself. The paramedics arrived minutes later. Felix protested weakly when they tried to sit him up. I can walk. No, Hyunjin said immediately. Felix looked at him. Hyunjin's jaw tightened. Arguments. Fine, you just hit the floor. I slipped. You collapsed. I was tired. You stopped responding. Fell silent. Hyunjin saw it again, that hesitation, that tiny flicker behind Felix's eyes. A secret. Something was wrong. And Hyunjin suddenly realized he had been watching Felix for weeks without truly seeing him. The untouched meals. The cups of coffee Felix kept forgetting to drink. The way he rubbed his wrists whenever he thought nobody was looking. The way he sometimes stopped talking in the middle of a sentence and stared at nothing. Hyunjin had noticed all of it. He simply hadn't wanted to connect the pieces, because connecting them meant admitting that Felix had been struggling. And Hyunjin had been too busy pretending everything was normal. As the paramedics prepared to take Felix to the hospital, Felix caught Hyunjin's sleeve. Come, Hyunjin stared down at his hand. What? Stay here. Why? Felix released him. His expression changed. For one brief moment, there was something dangerously close to fear in his eyes. I'll be fine. Hyunjin crouched in front of him. Felix looked away. Hyunjin lowered his voice. Look at me. Slowly, Felix did. What are you hiding? Felix's face went completely still. Hyunjin knew immediately. He had asked the right question, but Felix only whispered, nothing. Hyunjin hated himself for knowing that it was a lie. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and rain. Hyunjin sat beside Felix's bed long after the doctors had finished examining him. He hadn't moved. Felix had fallen asleep, or at least pretended to. Hyunjin knew the difference. Felix's fingers twitched whenever he was anxious. They were still now, but his breathing was too deliberate. You're awake, Hyunjin said. Felix opened his eyes. I'm tired. Lying again. Stared at the ceiling. Hyunjin leaned forward. Why did you collapse? I told you. You were tired. Then why did the doctor ask about your medication? Felix stopped breathing for a moment. Hyunjin's eyes narrowed. What medication? Felix turned his head. Hyunjin, what medication? Please. That word changed everything. Hyunjin's anger disappeared. Felix rarely said please when he was trying to win an argument. He said it when he was scared. Hyunjin sat back. What's happening to you? Felix closed his eyes. For several seconds neither spoke. Finally, Felix whispered, I've been getting dizzy. Long, a while. Long, 3 weeks. Hyunjin stared at him. Weeks, Felix nodded. And you didn't tell anyone. I thought it would stop. You thought passing out in a studio would make it stop. I didn't know I was going to pass out. Hyunjin stood. He walked toward the window. Rain crawled down the glass in silver lines. 3 weeks. He remembered Felix laughing 3 weeks ago. Felix had been standing beside him in the studio, complaining that Hyunjin had once again forgotten where he put his phone. Hyunjin remembered laughing. He remembered Felix's smile. Had Felix already been sick then? Had he been hiding it while standing right beside him? Hyunjin pressed his palm against the cold window. Flexion stared back. He looked furious, but underneath the anger was something much uglier. Guilt. I should have noticed. Felix's voice softened. Hyunjin, I should have noticed. Not responsible for me. Hyunjin turned. That's exactly what someone says when they're trying to make me feel less guilty. Looked down. Hyunjin walked back to the bed. Tell me everything. I don't know everything. Then tell me what you know. Hesitated. His fingers twisted the blanket. Been having these episodes. Dizziness. Sometimes my heart starts beating too fast. Sometimes I can't breathe properly. Hyunjin's expression hardened. Sometimes. Felix nodded. How often? Almost every day. Hyunjin went silent. The rain continued. Almost every day. Felix had been standing beside him almost every day, working, laughing, dancing, performing, and hiding the fact that his body was failing him. Why didn't you tell me? Felix looked at him, because the answer was apparently more difficult than Hyunjin expected. Finally, Felix said, because you would look at me differently. Hyunjin's chest tightened. How, like this? What, like I'm fragile? Hyunjin stared at him. Felix laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. I hate when people worry about me. Once they start worrying, they stop seeing me. Hyunjin's anger dissolved completely. He pulled the chair closer. I'm not going anywhere. Looked at him. You say that now. I mean it. You always mean things when you're scared. Hyunjin froze. Felix looked away. The words had slipped out too easily. Hyunjin remembered every time he had promised something while emotions were high, every time he had said, I'm here, every time Felix had smiled as though he believed him. Hyunjin suddenly understood. Maybe Felix wasn't afraid of being sick. Maybe he was afraid of becoming someone everyone had to protect. Someone whose dreams became secondary to his limitations. Someone people loved out of pity. Hyunjin reached for his hand. Felix stiffened, but he didn't pull away. You're not fragile. Swallowed. You don't know that. I know you. That's not the same thing. It is to me. Looked at him. Hyunjin's thumb brushed slowly across the back of Felix's hand. You scared me today. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. I didn't mean to. I know. Felix's eyes became wet. Hyunjin pretended not to notice. That was one of the few mercies he could give him. The next morning, Felix was released. He returned to the studio despite being told to rest. Hyunjin was waiting. The moment Felix entered, Hyunjin lifted his head. No, stopped. What? No, I haven't even said anything. You don't need to. Stared at him. You're impossible. You're supposed to be resting. I rested. For how long? Enough. Hyunjin stood. Felix immediately stepped backward. Hyunjin stopped. Felix looked exhausted, not physically, emotionally. I just want one normal day. The sentence silenced him. Felix looked toward the studio, the microphones, the speakers, the scattered lyric sheets, the familiar cables. This room had always been a place where Felix could forget everything else. Hyunjin understood, so he stepped aside. Fine. Looked surprised. But Hyunjin added, you're not working alone. Rolled his eyes. Of course. If you feel dizzy, I'll tell you. If your heart starts racing, I'll tell you. If you feel like you're going to collapse, Hyunjin. What? I'll tell you. Hyunjin nodded. Good. For several hours, things almost felt normal. Felix sang. Hyunjin worked beside him. They argued about harmonies. They laughed when Felix forgot a line. At one point, Felix threw a pencil at Hyunjin. Hyunjin threw it back. For a few precious minutes, there was no hospital, no fear, no secret, only music. Then Felix stopped singing. Hyunjin looked up. Felix was standing inside the recording booth. One hand rested against the microphone stand. His face had gone pale. Felix. Okay. Hyunjin stood immediately. Felix closed his eyes. Wait. Hyunjin froze. Felix breathed in slowly again. His fingers tightened around the stand. Hyunjin watched every movement. It happening. Felix nodded. Okay. Hyunjin kept his voice calm. Sit down. I can. Felix. This time Felix obeyed. He lowered himself onto the floor. Hyunjin opened the booth door and crouched beside him. Breathe. I am. Fast. Tried. His breathing shook. Hyunjin sat beside him. He didn't touch him, not until Felix reached for him first. When Felix's fingers curled around Hyunjin's wrist, Hyunjin stayed still. Does this help? Felix nodded. They remained that way until the trembling stopped. Felix leaned his head against the wall. I hate this. Hyunjin looked at him. I know. I hate feeling like my body is betraying me. I know. I hate that you have to see it. Hyunjin's eyes softened. Why? Felix laughed bitterly. Because you're you. That explains absolutely nothing. You always want to fix things. Hyunjin stared at him. Felix continued. When someone you care about is hurting, you don't know how to just stand there. Hyunjin looked at Felix's hand around his wrist. Maybe I don't want to fix you. Looked at him. Maybe I just want to stay. Felix's expression changed. For a moment, the entire studio seemed to disappear. Then Felix whispered, why? Hyunjin didn't answer because he didn't know how, because the truth had been growing inside him for too long, because perhaps he had run faster than everyone else that day, not simply because Felix had fallen, but because somewhere deep inside him, the thought of losing Felix had always terrified him, more than he was willing to admit. Felix looked away. Hyunjin. Something happens to me. Don't. Listen. Oh, Hyunjin. His voice was quiet, serious. Hyunjin finally looked at him. Felix swallowed. If something happens, don't stop living because you're worried about me. Hyunjin's eyes hardened. That sounds suspiciously like a goodbye. It isn't. Then don't talk like one. Look down. I'm scared. It was the confession Hyunjin had been waiting for. Not I'm tired, not I'm fine, not I can handle it, I'm scared. Hyunjin moved closer. So am I. Felix looked at him. You don't look scared. Very good at pretending, gave a weak smile. So am I know. Their eyes met, neither looked away, then Felix whispered, I don't want people to remember me as the person who collapsed. Hyunjin shook his head. They won't. How do you know? Because that isn't what I remember. Waited. Hyunjin smiled faintly. I remember you stealing my coffee and insisting it tasted better because it was mine. Laughed. I remember you pretending not to hear me when I asked you to stop playing the same song 15 times. You deserved that. I remember you falling asleep on the studio couch and denying it for 20 minutes. I wasn't asleep. You were snoring. I do not snore. You absolutely do. Laughed again. The sound filled the booth. Hyunjin watched him, and suddenly he realized something. Felix was still Felix. The illness hadn't taken that away. Fear hadn't taken it away. The collapse hadn't taken it away. Maybe the mistake was believing that protecting someone meant treating them like glass. Maybe real protection was sitting beside them when they were afraid and refusing to make their fear smaller. Over the following weeks, Felix followed the doctor's instructions. There were tests, more appointments, long conversations, changes to his schedule. There were days when Felix felt angry, days when he hated everyone asking if he was okay. Days when he wanted to throw every bottle of water Hyunjin placed beside him directly at Hyunjin's head. And Hyunjin learned. He learned not to hover. He learned when to speak, when to remain silent, when to distract Felix, when to simply sit beside him. Sometimes Felix needed a joke, sometimes he needed music. Sometimes he needed someone to admit that the situation was frightening, and sometimes he needed Hyunjin to stop treating him like someone who might disappear at any second. Hyunjin struggled with that last part, because every time Felix looked pale, his heart jumped. Every time Felix was quiet, he wondered whether something was wrong. Every time Felix touched his chest, Hyunjin's body instinctively prepared to run. Felix noticed, of course he did. One evening they were alone in the studio. Felix was sitting on the floor with his back against the couch. Hyunjin was organizing music files. Stop watching me. Hyunjin looked up. I wasn't. You were. I was looking at the computer. Your eyes were on me. Hyunjin sighed. You're annoying. Smiled. You're worried. Always worried. That's not healthy. Neither are you. Threw a pillow at him. Hyunjin caught it. They both laughed. Then Felix became quiet. Hyunjin. Yeah, thank you. Hyunjin frowned. For what? For running. Running. That day. Hyunjin looked at him. Felix's voice softened. Everyone froze. Hyunjin said nothing. You ran. His fingers tightened around the pillow. Felix continued. I remember opening my eyes and seeing you. Hyunjin's throat tightened. You looked terrified. I was. You looked like you were going to fight the entire world. I might have. Smiled. I knew I wasn't alone. Hyunjin looked away. He suddenly found the computer screen fascinating. Felix watched him. Hyunjin, what? Look at me. Hyunjin slowly turned. Felix smiled, not the bright smile he used for cameras, not the reassuring smile he used when people asked whether he was okay, something quieter, something real. You ran faster than anyone. Hyunjin laughed softly. I didn't think. I know. That's why Felix's smile faded slightly. What do you mean? Hyunjin stared at him. The answer had been waiting behind his teeth for weeks, maybe months, maybe longer. I didn't think about what people would say. Became still. I didn't think about whether I would look dramatic. Voice lowered. I didn't think about anything. Eyes searched his face. I just saw you fall. Hyunjin paused, and I couldn't lose you. Silence. Felix's lips parted. Hyunjin immediately looked away. Forget I said that. No, don't. Hyunjin looked back. Felix was crying, not dramatically, not loudly. One tear simply slipped down his cheek. Hyunjin's heart broke. Why are you crying? Felix wiped it away. Because nobody has ever said it like that. Hyunjin's voice softened. Like what? Like losing me would hurt. Hyunjin stared at him. It would. Looked down. Hyunjin moved closer. Felix, I know. No, look at me. Raised his eyes. Hyunjin's voice trembled. You don't have to be strong every second. Inhaled shakily. You don't have to pretend nothing scares you. Tear fell. And you don't have to disappear from everyone's life just because you're afraid they'll worry. Closed his eyes. Hyunjin sat beside him. Their shoulders touched. For once, neither spoke. Outside the studio, rain began tapping against the windows, the same sound, the same room, but everything felt different. Felix leaned his head against Hyunjin's shoulder. Hyunjin went still, then slowly, carefully, he rested his cheek against Felix's hair. Felix whispered, I'm still scared. I know. If it happens again, then we deal with it again. If it gets worse, then we deal with that too. If you get tired, Hyunjin closed his eyes. I probably will. Lifted his head. Hyunjin smiled, but being tired isn't the same as leaving. Stared at him, something inside his expression finally loosened. The fear was still there, it might remain for a long time, but it no longer had the whole room to itself. Months later, Felix returned to the microphone. His hands trembled, only slightly. Hyunjin noticed, of course he noticed, but this time he didn't rush toward him. He didn't ask whether Felix was okay. He simply stood behind the glass and waited. Felix adjusted his headphones. The instrumental began, his eyes closed. Then he sang. The first note was soft, the second stronger. By the chorus, his voice filled the studio. Hyunjin watched through the glass. There was something different in Felix now. Not weakness, not fearlessness, something better. Acceptance. When the song ended, silence filled the room. Felix opened his eyes. Hyunjin smiled. Felix removed his headphones. Well, Hyunjin pressed the talk button. Again, stared at him. Me, you can do better. Felix's mouth dropped open. Hyunjin burst out laughing. Felix stormed toward the door. You're unbelievable. You asked. I asked whether it was good. It was good. Then why again? Because I want to hear it again.
The next morning, Felix woke before his alarm. For several seconds, he did not move. The ceiling above him was pale beneath the early morning light, and the room was quiet except for the low hum of the air conditioner. His body felt strangely heavy, as if sleep had left a layer of exhaustion behind. He turned his head toward the clock. 5:17 a.m. Seriously. His voice sounded rough. Felix reached for his phone, intending to silence the alarm before it could wake him. Instead, he noticed a message waiting on the screen. Hyunjin, you awake? Felix stared at it. Then another message appeared. I know you're awake. Felix narrowed his eyes. How? The reply came immediately. Because you always wake up before your alarm when you're nervous. Felix frowned. I am not nervous. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Hyunjin finally replied, you're a terrible liar. Felix smiled despite himself. He typed a response, go back to sleep. Hyunjin answered almost instantly, no. Felix rolled onto his back. Why? Because today is your first full rehearsal after everything. Felix's smile faded. He knew exactly what Hyunjin meant. Today was the first time he was expected to rehearse from beginning to end without stepping away whenever his body demanded it. The doctors had told him to take things gradually. His schedule had been adjusted. Everyone knew. And yet knowing that did not make returning to normal any easier. Felix stared at the ceiling. A strange pressure settled inside his chest. Not pain, not exactly, anxiety. The kind that began somewhere beneath his ribs and slowly climbed toward his throat. His phone vibrated again. Hyunjin, don't overthink it. Felix immediately typed, too late. The response was simple, then overthink it with me. Felix laughed quietly. That was Hyunjin. He could never completely eliminate Felix's fear. But somehow he could make it less lonely. Felix sat up. His feet touched the cold floor. For a moment he waited. Nothing happened, no dizziness, no sudden racing heartbeat, no weakness. He exhaled. Okay, he stood, then his phone vibrated again. Hyunjin had sent another message, and Felix stared at it for a long time. I'll be outside when you arrive. Felix's thumb hovered over the screen. He knew Hyunjin meant it literally. That was the problem. Hyunjin had become predictable in the most frustrating way. He waited, he watched, he worried. And sometimes Felix wondered whether Hyunjin had forgotten how to breathe normally whenever Felix was within 10 meters of him. Felix typed, you don't have to babysit me. The answer arrived quickly. I'm not babysitting you. Then what are you doing? A pause, waiting for my favorite person. Felix stopped. His expression changed. He read the sentence again. Favorite person, not favorite friend. Not favorite teammate, favorite person. His heartbeat quickened. This time, he knew exactly why. He typed nothing. Instead, he locked the phone and placed it face down on the bed. Idiot. His smile betrayed him. By the time Felix arrived at the studio, Hyunjin was already there, of course. He stood beside the vending machine with a paper cup in his hand, wearing a black hoodie and an expression that suggested he had been waiting for hours. Felix stopped several feet away. You actually came early. Hyunjin glanced at his phone. I came at the exact time I said I would. You're 15 minutes early. That's called being responsible. That's called having no life. Hyunjin looked offended. I have a life. Really? Yes. What is it? Hyunjin pointed at him. You froze. Hyunjin froze too. His eyes widened. That sounded wrong. His mouth twitched. Very wrong. I know what you meant. You absolutely don't. Walked past him. Come on, Hyunjin. Hyunjin followed. You're smiling. Not. You are. Up. The studio door opened. Warm air rushed over them, carrying the familiar smell of coffee, cables, dust, and the faint metallic scent of electronic equipment. Felix stopped just inside. The room looked exactly the same microphone, the same mixing desk, the same couch, the same floor where his body had collapsed months ago. For one brief second, the memory came back with painful clarity. The music, the dizziness, his knees giving out, Hyunjin running. Felix's fingers tightened around the strap of his bag. Hyunjin noticed. He always noticed, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he walked to the speakers and turned on a low instrumental track, something soft, something familiar. Felix looked at him. Why that? You like it. You hate this song. I have changed. You called it boring. I have matured. Laugh, the tension broke. Hyunjin smiled. That was intentional. Felix knew it, and somehow he was grateful. The rehearsal began slowly. The first hour went well. Felix sang, he danced, he laughed with the others. He drank water whenever he was reminded. He even teased Hyunjin when Hyunjin missed a cue. Felix said. Hyunjin stared at him. What? You missed that? I did not. You did. The music changed. The music did not change. It changed emotionally. Stared at him. What does that even mean? It means I'm artistic. It means you messed up. Hyunjin pointed at him. Careful. Laughed. For a while, everything felt normal. Then they began the second run-through. Felix felt the first warning halfway through the song. A slight shift in his balance, almost nothing. He ignored it, then his vision blurred around the edges. Felix swallowed. Keep going. He had learned to recognize the early signs. His fingers became cold. His chest tightened. The room seemed farther away. He continued moving, 1 step, 2, 3. Then Hyunjin looked at him. Their eyes met. Felix knew immediately. Hyunjin knew he had seen it. Felix shook his head. Not now. Hyunjin stopped. The music continued. Felix kept dancing. Stop the music, Hyunjin said. Felix's head snapped toward him. No, Hyunjin's expression changed. Felix. Okay, stop. I said I'm okay. Music finally stopped. Everyone looked at them. Felix's cheeks burned. He hated this, the attention, the concern, the sudden silence. It made him feel like his body had become public property. I said I'm fine. Hyunjin approached. Felix stepped backward. Hyunjin stopped. Something passed between them, pain, frustration, fear. Felix hated the look in Hyunjin's eyes, not because it was angry, because it was scared. I just need a minute, Felix said. Okay, not collapsing. I didn't say you were. You were thinking it. Hyunjin's jaw tightened. Maybe. Turned away, he walked toward the corner of the room. His hands were trembling. He pressed them against his thighs, breathed slow. The others gradually returned to their work, giving him space. Hyunjin remained several steps away. For once, he did not approach. Felix appreciated that. After a minute, his vision cleared. His breathing steadied. He looked up. Hyunjin was still there, not hovering, not touching him, just waiting. Felix walked over. Okay now. Hyunjin nodded. Good. Studied his face. You're angry. No, you are. Scared. Blinked. Hyunjin looked exhausted, not physically, emotionally. Scared because you keep saying you're fine when you're not. Looked down. I don't want everyone to stop because of me. Not stopping because of you. Yes, we are. No, Hyunjin. You think everything stopping means you're a burden. Went silent. The words hit too accurately. Hyunjin stepped closer. Sometimes stopping is just stopping. Looked at him. You don't have to earn the right to take a breath. Something inside Felix cracked. His eyes dropped. Hyunjin softened. Not asking you to be helpless. I know. Asking you to stop fighting your own body like it's your enemy. Felix's throat tightened. I don't know how. Hyunjin's expression changed. There was no judgment, only understanding. Then learn. Looked up. Learn with me. The words were so gentle that Felix almost broke. Instead, he nodded. Okay. Hyunjin smiled faintly. Okay, they returned to rehearsal. This time, Felix stopped when he needed to, and something strange happened, nothing terrible. No one became angry, no one blamed him. The world did not collapse because Felix needed 5 minutes. By the end of the session, Felix was exhausted. But it was a good kind of exhaustion, the kind that came from working instead of surviving. When everyone left, Felix stayed behind. Hyunjin noticed. You coming? In a minute. Hyunjin looked at him. You want me to wait? Felix hesitated, then nodded. Yeah. Hyunjin sat down. Felix remained near the microphone. The studio was quiet now. He looked at the equipment, then at the floor, then at Hyunjin. You remember the day I collapsed? Hyunjin's face became still. Yeah. I don't remember everything. Hyunjin waited. I remember the music. Voice became quieter. I remember feeling dizzy. Looked down. And then I remember opening my eyes. Hyunjin's expression softened. What do you remember? You. Hyunjin said nothing. You were holding my hand. I was checking your pulse. You were holding my hand. Hyunjin looked away. Felix smiled faintly. You were crying. I was not. You were. My eyes were irritated. What? Fear? Laughed. Hyunjin shook his head. Fine. Walked closer. You really thought I was going to die? Hyunjin's smile vanished. I thought I might lose you. Stopped. Hyunjin stared at the floor. I've never been good at losing people. Felix's expression softened. Who did you lose? Hyunjin looked at him. The question changed the atmosphere. For several seconds, Hyunjin said nothing. Then he leaned back against the couch. Someone important sat beside him. Who? My grandmother. Waited. She raised me for a long time. Hyunjin's voice was controlled, but Felix could hear the old wound underneath it. She was the first person who made me believe I could become an artist. Listen, she died when I was younger. I'm sorry. Hyunjin nodded. After that, I became obsessed with never being too late. Frowned. What do you mean? Hyunjin looked at him. If someone I care about is hurting, I want to know immediately. Felix's heart sank. And if I don't know, Hyunjin smiled sadly, then I blame myself. Understood. Suddenly, Hyunjin's behavior made sense. The way he watched, the way he reacted, the way he ran. It wasn't only about Felix. It was about an old fear, a fear that had survived years, a fear of arriving after everything was already over. Felix slowly reached for his hand. Hyunjin looked down. Felix intertwined their fingers. You're not too late. Hyunjin stared at him. Felix squeezed his hand. You were there. Hyunjin swallowed. You ran faster than anyone. A small laugh escaped Hyunjin. That's what you keep saying. It matters. To you, Felix looked directly into his eyes. Yes. Answer hung between them. Hyunjin's expression softened. Felix suddenly became aware of how close they were. Their shoulders touched. Their hands remained intertwined. Neither moved. Hyunjin's gaze dropped briefly to Felix's lips. Felix noticed. His breath caught. Hyunjin looked back into his eyes. Something had changed. Neither of them could pretend otherwise. Felix whispered, Hyunjin. Yeah. What are you doing? Hyunjin swallowed. Nothing. Eyes narrowed. You're starring. So are you. Not. You are. Tried to pull his hand away. Hyunjin held it not tightly, just enough to stop him. Felix looked down at their hands, then back at Hyunjin. Why? Hyunjin's voice became barely audible. I'm trying to understand something. What? Hyunjin hesitated, then he said, why losing you scares me more than losing anyone else. Stopped breathing. The studio seemed to become impossibly quiet. Hyunjin released his hand. Felix didn't move, neither did Hyunjin. The words were already spoken. There was no way to take them back. Felix stared at him. Then his phone vibrated. Both of them jumped. Felix looked at the screen, a message from the clinic. His expression changed immediately. Hyunjin noticed. What is it? Felix didn't answer. Felix. Felix read the message again. His face became pale. Hyunjin leaned forward. What happened? Felix slowly lowered the phone. They want me to come back tomorrow. Why? Felix looked at him. They found something in the results. Hyunjin's entire body went still. Felix's fingers tightened around his phone. The room suddenly felt colder. What did they find? Felix shook his head. They didn't say. Hyunjin stood. Then we go tomorrow. Looked up at him. Hyunjin, together. I can go alone. No, you don't even know what it is. Exactly. Stared at him. Hyunjin held out his hand. Felix looked at it. For a moment, fear tried to pull him backward. Then he took it. Hyunjin's fingers closed around his. Neither spoke. Outside, the rain began again. And inside the studio, beneath the same lights where Felix had once fallen, they sat together in silence, waiting for a tomorrow neither of them was ready to face.